I was held hostage in Iraq by a Shia militia for over 2.5 years.
It was a really unstable, lawless place, and the threat of kidnapping was high.
I think it was more chaotic than he bargained for. I don't think he envisaged how dangerous it was going to be.
We were in chains, shackled, blindfolded, handcuffed.
I didn't eat because I didn't know if Pete was eating.
I'm like, this is it. This is where this is going to end. Next thing I feel is this metal thing in the side of my head.
The threat to them remains very high indeed.
Release the prisoners, we can go. It's as simple as that. I grew up in Lincoln. I was involved heavily with Scouts, so I joined the Curbs, I went to Scouts, I became a patrol leader, senior patrol leader, got the Chief Scout Award, went into Venture Scouts, got the Queen Scout Award, excelled in that kind of environment. I went to school and I found an interest in computing, and that is what has followed me through my life.
Pete hasn't got any family as such. I guess I've always considered him to be my family. So he's always, at various points, lived with me.
My first memory of meeting Kay was at a Venture Scout meeting. One of her friends attended Venture Scouts, and so Kay came along. That's how it sort of started. I think I gave her a ride home on the back of the bike or something like that.
We've just always been together. We have the sort of friendship that it doesn't matter if we don't talk for a while because we know we're both still there, you know. Every so often I'll get a message, or I'll send him a message, just he pops into my brain and send a message. But then if the phone rings and it's Pete on the phone, it's always bad news. He never rings me if he's got something bad to say. He's had an accident or something terrible's happened. That's a phone call.
I went to Nottingham Trent University and I did a degree in IT. And it was during that time that I learned that I could work in international development. And I quite liked the idea of travelling and being paid to do it as a job. I chose to go to Guyana in South America, and I did that for a few years, and from that was the catalyst of working internationally, teaching computing. Completed my 2 years of volunteering in Guyana, and I'd done a third extra year. By this point, volunteering is good for the soul, but it's not good for the bank account. And so I needed to start getting a salary. And I saw a job advertised for someone who can help train IT staff to program a database system in the Ministry of Finance in Iraq.
Pete sent me an email from when he was in Guyana to say that he'd got an opportunity to go and work in Iraq. Pete is very free spirit. He doesn't have any roots anywhere. He's got itchy feet. He's never in one place for so long. I thought it was not the best idea he's ever had, not the greatest idea. Yeah, I was worried, of course I was worried.
In 2007, in Iraq, it was a time of the surge, where the US-led coalition, which had been in country since 2003, had an influx of coalition troops, about 20,000 or so, primarily up in Baghdad, to really help the effort to quash the insurgency that was taking place. And coalition forces had been there since 2003, after 9/11 and after the Americans and others had gone into Afghanistan to rout out the Taliban and get rid of bin Laden. It was a really unstable, lawless place where you had militias roaming around and the threat of kidnapping was high.
Initially, the job was only supposed to be for 3 months. So while I knew that Iraq was dangerous at that time, I felt that that job in itself would be quite safe. It was an IT guy, I had no political association, I wasn't high profile. And I'd be working with local Iraqis, and I knew from working overseas, being around local people is your security blanket. Additionally, my company advised me we had kidnap and ransom insurance, I would have a security team. You know, it would be as safe as it could be. As we landed at Baghdad airport, we got off the plane and we walked down the walkway onto the runway. And I just saw this missile kind of fly over and hit the edge of the airport, and this plume of smoke come up at the edge. I just remember thinking, welcome to Iraq. I was met by a security team, and we got in the vehicles and we drove from the airport to Baghdad. And what I remember seeing was, as we were driving along, on the main highway was these American military vehicles with these Iraqis all sort of handcuffed and knelt down in the middle of the road, surrounded by these American soldiers, a huge group of them, maybe about 30 people. On that first day, I remember thinking, yeah, this might be a bit more dangerous than the news sort of makes it out to be.
We sent emails to and fro, and I'd sort of keep him up to date with what was happening here, and check in on him, and he would message me to say how it was going there. I think it was more chaotic than he bargained for. I don't think he envisaged how dangerous it was going to be.
The main threat in the insurgency at the time in 2007 was the Shia militia. And throughout that period, they would actively be targeting suitable hostages to be held for political gains or for ransom. Foreign workers in Iraq during that period, it would have been a really difficult and dangerous time for them. Yes, the money would have been good, the opportunities would have been good, but the risks would have been extremely high.
It was the morning of May the 29th. I was working with the programming team of the Ministry of Finance, along with the systems analyst, and I was showing them the system and showing them how to get reports out of it. And all of a sudden I heard someone shout, "Get down." And everyone in my room stood up. So I know from working in international development, try not to be the odd one out. And clearly me sitting down while everyone stood up made me look the odd one out. So I stood up. My thinking was I would blend into the crowd, right? Unfortunately, when I stood up, it put me right next to the door. So the next thing, door opened, and there was a Ministry of Interior police officer there. Now, the Ministry of Interior is responsible for foreigners within Iraq. I look at him, he looks at me, and he puts a gun to my head. My initial reaction was I laughed, and I put my hands up. And what I remember most is not the gun pointing at my face, but he had a machine gun slung over his arm, and the barrel of the gun was pointing right at my groin. And I just remember thinking, if this machine gun fires, this is really going to hurt. And with that, he said, "Come on." The place is overrun by Iraqi police officers. They're all over the place. I'm led to the front of the building of the Ministry of Finance data center, and I can see the team leader of my security team surrounded by about 5 or 6 Iraqi police officers. So I walk up, I got my hands up, and I said to the team leader, I said, "What do we do?" Thinking he's going to come up with some amazing piece of advice. And he says to me, "Just do whatever they say." And I was like, "Is that it?" He's like, "Yeah."
The advice I'd give anybody, if they ever found themselves in the unfortunate position of being kidnapped or even having a gun to their head, is be compliant. That is not the moment for heroics. So it's being compliant, hold on to your humanity, and do as you're told. And if you're able to, yes, have a look around to see where you are and where you're being taken, but above all, don't look to antagonize the kidnappers.
My emotions at that point were quite calm. I just thought it was a police issue. I thought our IDs were wrong, maybe the security team didn't have permits for their weapons, maybe they were under arrest for having weapons in a public place, in a university, you know, not seen as government, Iraqi government people or something like that. There was no violence going on, just a lot of shouting and a lot of sort of taking the phones and, you know, making a stand and all this sort of stuff. I just, at that point, was not frightened. I was just more thinking this is a legal issue, I suppose, more than anything else. They put me into a back seat of the police vehicle, and 2 Iraqi police officers jump in the back, and we zoom off, lights and sirens going, so we're going straight through checkpoints all the time. In my pocket, I had about $400 US, and I passed it to the officer in front who seemed to be in charge, and I said, "$1." He looked at it, and he threw it out the window. That's the point I knew this was an abduction. So as we're going along, they're firing machine guns out the window, the sirens are going. We're going through all the checkpoints, army checkpoints, police checkpoints, just being let through. They took my ID badge off and they passed it to the police officer in the front, threw that out the window. After about 10 minutes, we stop. I'm taking out the vehicle. So I don't know where I am. We're still in Baghdad, but it's some sort of market. And we put into the back of like this minibus, like the back compartment of the minibus where you put all the suitcases. And then I see my 4 British security guards being thrown in the back, and they're in various states. The team leader, his hands are bound at the front, and the other 2 guards, one's handcuffed behind their back, one's handcuffed at the front. They've got blood on their head. We drive on. We're probably only 30 minutes into the abduction at this point. The minibus stops. The British guards are taken out. And eventually I'm taken out. I'm led upstairs, and I can see the 4 British guards sat facing the wall. I'm still not blindfolded, nothing like that. And they sit me down facing the opposite wall. There, a couple of minutes, they lift me up, they throw my glasses away, and then they blindfold me, and then they bind my hands with cloth. And they lead me downstairs and drive me around for a few minutes, like literally only 2 minutes, take me out of the vehicle, back up the stairs and back into the same building. I can hear the British people talking, so I know I'm in the same place. At this point, I'm still trying to process what the heck is going on, quite frankly.
It's a common tactic of kidnappers to move the hostages from place to place quite frequently. The reason they do that is to continue with the disorientation and instill the confusion in the minds of the hostages, but also so they don't get tracked and identified and the stronghold gets located by the governments and the military forces, because the last thing the kidnappers want is there to be a hostage rescue attempt on the stronghold.
I can hear the guy who's handcuffed behind his back in a lot of pain. I hear them lift him up and they walk him out the building, and there's a gunshot. I can hear the British guards. They're saying, "Are you here? Are you alive? Are you here? Yeah, we're here. Have they just shot him? What does this mean?" And I'm processing this information, and all of this, they lift me up, they walk me out the building, I walk me halfway down the stairs, and then there's a gunshot. I guess it was just a scare tactic.
There must have been something on the news about a kidnapping in Iraq, and as soon as I heard that, I emailed Pete. Obviously, Pete knows that I worry about him. He knows me, and he would always email back, and he didn't reply. And I rang the Foreign Office, and I said I wanted to talk to somebody about this kidnapping in Iraq. I think my friend's been kidnapped, and they said, "What's your friend's name?" And I said, "Peter Moore." And they said, "Give me your contact details. I'll get someone to ring you straight back." And I knew straight away.
They start to lift me up, like from my feet. They're trying to push me over something. And I realized it was like the back of a truck, like a Bedford truck. And so they threw me over the top, but of course I can't see anything. So they throw me over the top and I land on my chest and there's this huge crack in my rib. I broke my rib, you know. And with that, they moved me to a compartment, a secret compartment behind the back of the cab of this truck. And then they close this secret compartment and we drive off. And it's really bumpy. This thing's really narrow. I mean, it's less than my shoulder width, so I'm sat like this. And my head is bouncing from side to side on the metal sides. I get a little bit brave, so I lift up my blindfold and I can see the 2 guys in front of me. I lean forward to the guy in front of me. I said, "Hey, you know, I'm the IT guy." He says, "Yeah, I know who you are. You know, we're 2 security guys." Now, I can see the sunlight through the cracks in the weld in this compartment, and I'm looking around, and there's no way out. You can't get out of this. And we spend, I reckon, the whole day, 12 hours, something like that, in this back of this truck. Eventually, we start hearing cattle grids, and the British guy says to me, "The only place in Iraq that I know of that has cattle grids is Basra." He says, "This is Shia area. This is not Al-Qaeda." The British guards were split into 2 groups of 2. The 2 I came down with were being treated pretty rough. They brought us in a chain with 3 padlocks, and they took the chain, one around my wrist and padlocked it, then down to the foot and padlocked it, and down to the other one and padlocked it. During the day, we just sat on a chair with a wall up to our knees, blindfolded, and that was it. Occasionally, they'd take the blindfold off, take us to the toilet and come back. So we did that 3 times a day, and they would take it off for us to eat. And the Iraqi, he spoke very little English, he was very clear. He said, "We are not Al-Qaeda, we are Shia militia, and we want you for an exchange of our people."
The League of the Righteous were a paramilitary organization and political party backed by Iran, a Shia organization who were really seeking to exert their influence in the region at the time. One of the things we would look to do early on is to establish what is it the kidnappers want. And 9 times out of 10, they would actually offer up what their demands were. And that then was quite easy to deal with because we could then formulate a strategy about how we were going to conduct the negotiation to meet those outcomes. But in a political case like this one with Peter, there's far more at stake, particularly if the prison exchange is for high-value, significant leader of an organization, for example, as it was in this case. The negotiations take on a whole new level of complexity.
Some Iraqis come to see us, like senior Iraqis come to see us. And this Iraqi speaks pretty good English. And my first question was, I said, "Are you going to kill us?" And his response was that he wasn't as kind as his friends that were keeping us. I was like, great. He said, "We think you're 4 soldiers and an army officer." And I said, no, I'm not an officer. Why do you think that? And he says, "Because one of your people has an army ID card." And I was like, "Really?" He says, "Yes." And they went away with that. They didn't really follow that up anymore. And I said, "Has one of you got an army ID card?" And this guy, who was being treated not so well as myself and the medic guy, says, "Yes, I had a valid ID card because it got me through army checkpoints quicker." I'm like, great, you know. The next day, we all get blindfolded and this leader comes back and he says, "We don't know who you are, but we know you're not an army officer and we know they're not soldiers." My initial reaction was a bit of relief. I was like, "Oh, that's good." And then with that, they left.
It was awful. We weren't getting any information. I was obsessed with listening to the news, and my brain was in this constant loop of awfulness. But in the beginning, I didn't eat because I didn't know if Pete was eating. It was horrible. I just couldn't imagine what was going on.
The one who initially handcuffed me behind my back poured water over me. Then they put a chair next to the door. Made me stand on the chair with my back to the door, put my arms over the top. One of the guys pulled down on the handcuffs, pulled the chair away, just left me hanging there. Did that 4 or 5 times. Very painful. Told me that, it was my own fault, sort of thing. Told me to be quiet. I mean, it was very painful. I mean, I was, in pain. I was screaming in pain. And they just started kicking me and hitting me and stuff. After that, they took me down, pushed me onto the floor and started kicking me. They did other things. They kept stabbing me with a pin and all sorts of stuff like that, which was quite irritating, smacking me on the head with a pistol, the metal barrel of the pistol. I mean, to the point that, I got like an indentation in the back of my head, where they've been doing it. So, and that happened regularly, daily.
Sort of a couple of months in, I ended up going to the doctor because I was just so depressed and suicidal, and I just couldn't function. And we were told to do nothing. We were told not to talk to anybody. We were told nothing on social media, don't talk to anybody about anything, total media blackout. It was just the helplessness. I just had to concentrate on work because there was nothing else I could do.
The use of media in hostage negotiations is a double-edged sword. It's understandable why the family want to keep the plight of their loved one front and centre to raise that profile and put pressure on the negotiators and the government to secure the release of their loved one. However, from a geopolitical level, when we enter that arena where there's either prisoner exchanges or it's being conducted at the government level, there's a significant propaganda value of utilising or exploiting the media to the aims of the kidnappers, which is why it's really important to try and control that narrative. And the more we can take out of the public gaze, behind the scenes, it can kind of minimise any unintended consequences that could arise from showing that media in the public.
With the British Guards, I'd had a conversation, and we felt, dead or alive, 6 months, this would be over. At the 6-month mark, and was being looked after by this police sergeant from the Ministry of Transport. We got on with him quite well, to be honest with you. One day he came in and he took me off the chains, handcuffed me behind my back and blindfolded me. And that's what they do when they were doing a move. But this was weird. This was in the daytime. Normally you only did moves at night. So I was a bit unsure what was going on. And he walked me outside and pushed me to the floor onto my knees. And I remember thinking, that's weird. What's happening? Next thing I feel is this metal thing in the side of my head. And my body just started shaking and sweating. Never experienced a fear like it. There's a click, and then there's a bang. And I just remember sitting there, and I heard the cartridges, bing, 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 bing. And I sat there handcuffed, and I was like, I'm dead. They've just killed me. I always said if I was going to be executed, I was going to show no fear. I was going to be really strong, British stiff upper lip. So I thought to myself, you know, if I get executed, I could be potentially somewhere for eternity. If I could have a thought in my mind when I'm executed, that's the place I'd be for eternity. The image I had, I was in the back of these fields walking the dog with this steam train going by. And I was so annoyed myself that I showed fear and my mind went totally blank. And I forgot that I wanted to remember that. That annoyed me so much. But those mock executions happened probably 20, 25 times during my time as a hostage, to the point that it became a bit of a joke. You know, you'd wake up in the morning, mock execution, have breakfast, right? And any one of those moments could have had a bullet in there and I would never have known.
Mock executions are in the playbook that kidnappers will use time and time again because it instills fear, it instills control. So one of the things we would look to do from a negotiation perspective is to call out bad behaviour. We would never reward that. And so if there were mock executions or other threats made, we would stand up and push back on that. We would emphasise to the kidnappers, hey, you need to look after the hostages, because if you don't, you're not going to get any money for a corpse. And equally, you're not going to get the prisoner exchange in Peter's case as a swap if you mistreat him.
I think 2007, it was pretty harsh. We were in chains, shackled, blindfolded, handcuffed, periodically beaten, water poured over us. Conditions were pretty harsh in 2007. 2008, things got better. I was separated off from the others in 2008. I don't know what to say. Finish. What happened was the militia came in and said, we need to do this video. They said to me, do a video saying you're being treated really badly, you're having a hard time. And so I did all that. And then said, no, do it again, but this time be happy, say you're having a good time. And then they're like, no, just say whatever you want. So I did that, and this is the video you see. My name is Peter Moore. I've been held here for nearly 8 months now. I miss my family very much. I live in Lincoln, in England. I just want to get out of here. Nothing is happening. To Gordon Brown, the deal is simple. Release the prisoners, we can go. It's as simple as that. It's a simple exchange of people. That's all they want, just to have their people released and we can go home. Now, the reason you're seeing me from the shoulders is that actually I'm chained to a grill in the wall and I actually can't move any further forward. And at the start of this, I was handcuffed, but they took them off.
That was horrible to see Pete like that, because he's quite a tall, sort of solid chap, and he was just wasting away. It was horrible to see.
Hostage videos, or otherwise known as proof of life videos, play a key role in negotiation. They're designed specifically to demonstrate to the families, to the government or the company, the hostage, that your loved one, your colleague, your citizen is alive and well. And crucially, before any deal is agreed, any money's handed over, any prisoner exchange takes place, we want that proof of life then as well.
We were allowed to see CNN news at that time in Iraq when it was released. And I always remember the CNN news article. The demands were, they'd not told us, they'd always told us the demands were a prisoner exchange. The demands to the news was they wanted full withdrawal of British military from Iraq, and if they didn't withdraw within 10 days, I think, they were going to kill us. CNN posted up all the photos of foreign hostages that had been captured in Iraq. There was 10 or something like that. And then it greyed out the ones that had been killed, and it left 2. And I just remember thinking, this does not look good.
I was worried about all 5 of them because I didn't think any negotiating would go on. But I never, well, I don't really know how I thought it was going to end. I know Pete, and he's very resourceful. So if anybody could cope in a difficult situation, I knew Pete could.
Late last night, the Iraqi authorities passed to us the remains of 2 bodies. We do not yet have confirmation of who they are. Forensic examinations are underway to establish their identities and the causes of death as soon as possible. I reiterate, on behalf of the British government and I think all the British people, our call for the immediate safe release of all the remaining hostages. I also confirm that we are working intensively towards that goal. But I also have to say that the threat to them remains very high indeed.
There was an announcement that 2 of the guards had been killed, which was devastating for their families. But there was still a sense of we don't know what's happening. There was the 3rd announcement that the 3rd bodyguard had been killed, which was terrifying.
As a hostage, when you discover that your fellow captives have been killed, in whatever circumstances, it's going to have a major impact on your psychology and on your emotions. And in Peter's case, the people he was being held with died. And I'm sure it would have gone through his mind as to, well, am I next? Well, why haven't I been killed? Why have I been spared? What does this mean now for whilst I'm being held?
Two years in, everyone's been killed. And I'm in a house. And in the roof is a hook. And it had a chandelier on it. And the Iraqis had removed the chandelier. And I knew this hook was strong. They'd come in with a bar and they'd do these chin-ups on the bar. And at this point, the number 2 commander of this militia had been released, Laith El-Kasali. And I said, look, you want to keep me as your prisoner, that's fine. But America did not keep you in these chains. They didn't blindfold you. And, you know, why are you doing this to me when America didn't do this to you? I said, you want to keep me as a prisoner, you keep me as a prisoner like America treated you. And he agreed. He said, look, that's fine. We'll take the chain off. But if you try and escape, we're going to kill you. I said, that's fine. You know, I was 2 years in, I was weak. It wasn't going to happen. Put the chain on a shelf in a cupboard next to me. And I thought about this a lot. And I thought I could end this. And I thought it'd be very fitting. I could hang myself using that chain in that hook. Because the only reason I want to hang myself now is to see the shock on their face as they walk in and see me hanging there, knowing that they're in big trouble for letting it happen. Of course, if I ever hang myself, I think it's fairly safe to say that you're not going to be able to see anything. So now I can't achieve what it is I want to achieve. So I'm really frustrated with that. And it takes me about a month to really wind myself down to not do it. And that is the point when I said to myself, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this out alive and try and build up my rights, try and get things out of them. And I knew that they would never let me go, but I thought I could just improve my immediate environment, which was this room. I would ask for different types of food, different drink. I eventually had satellite TV, had a PlayStation, had a laptop at one point. I was able to walk around the room, exercise, ensuite, shower, toilet, that sort of thing. 4 o'clock in the morning, they come in and wake me up. And they said, you know, get up. You're being released. So I was like, why? Why am I being released? Oh, yeah, real stroppy teenager sort of thing. I've been told I'm being released over and over again. He said, look, we've brought you these release clothes. You've got to have a shower. You're going to the British Embassy at 12 o'clock. With that, he gets up and walks out. And I'm thinking, well, I don't feel like I'm being released. I don't know what's going on, but I'm pretty sure I'm not being released. I thought maybe the Shia militia had a fight with Al-Qaeda and they were going to exchange me with Al-Qaeda. My thought process at the time was that's good because Al-Qaeda will exchange me for money. I have kidnap and ransom insurance. My company will pay. About an hour later, they come back in the room. They blindfold me, take me down into a car, put me in the back seat of a car, take the blindfold off and we drive off. There's a guy with a camera in the passenger seat in the front, turns around, points the camera at me. It's the very same guy that took me hostage with a machine gun pointing at my groin. It was him. And we put into this driveway and I get out the vehicle and I walk into this room. And the room is full of people. Half the people are wearing normal clothes, carrying cameras, this sort of thing. The other half are like militia, big machine guns, scarves around a face, army gear, this sort of stuff. This guy in the suit gets up. He says, are you Peter Moore? I says, yes. He says, my name's Sami Al-Askari. Okay. He says, I'm with the Iraqi government. I'm here to take you to the British Embassy. My immediate thought was, my situation has not improved. I've just spent 2.5 years with the Iraqi police and now I'm being handed over to the Iraqi government. So these Iraqis say, go, go, go. So I get up and I start walking out towards the back of the room to the door and I get stopped by this big militia guy, machine gun job. And they turn me around, and he stands on one side, another militia guy on the other. And there's another militia guy about 1.5 meters away from me. And he's got his hand down his back. And I'm like, this is it. This is where this is going to end, right in this room in front of all these cameras right here, right now. And I just thought, well, you know, it is what it is. You know, I made it this far. Never mind. Pulls out a camera, takes a photo. And with that, they tell me to go. So I walk out, I get in the back seat of this car, and we're driving down the road. To the right of me is this Iraqi government guy, and there's 2 people in the front seats wearing suits, machine guns, twirly things in the rear, driving along. And I can hear this guy on the phone. He's like, yeah, he's with me now. We'll be there in half an hour, all the rest of it. And he says to me, that was the British Embassy. And I thought, no way. If that was the British Embassy, they'd want to talk to me. We drive through some blast walls into a driveway. I get out the vehicle. I have no idea where I am. And this guy walks up to me. I don't know who he is. He comes up to me and says, are you Peter Moore? It's like, yeah. He's like, this is the British Embassy. We're here to take you home. I couldn't believe it. I just wanted to be on my own. And the only place I could think of where I could be at home was the toilet. So my opening statement was, I need a pee. And this embassy guy says, yeah, just go through there. I walk in the toilet, I put my hands on the wall, I start banging my head on the wall. I'm like, stop, stop, stop. You're cracking up, get a grip. And I walk over to the sink, I just splash myself with water. And I look up, and there's this huge bank of mirrors, just looking back at myself. And I'm like, you've done it. You've beaten the odds. I can believe it. I just started crying at that point.
Peter was released after 31 months in exchange for Shia cleric Qais al-Ghazali, who had been held by the US military. When hostages are released, there's a number of things that take place. First of all, there's the physical examination medically to make sure they've got no any wounds or injuries that need treating to. They'll check them for malnutrition, etc. They'll undergo some kind of really quick, hot debrief, psychological debrief. Then they'll be reunited with their families briefly before then undergoing a bit more of a fuller, longer debrief to ascertain what went on for them, where they're being held, etc., to see if there's any intelligence value, particularly if other hostages are still being held by the same group. But then gradually over time, slowly but surely, they'll be reintegrated back into society. But ideally, what they don't want to see happen is to suddenly be put before the world's media until the hostage, that newly released hostage, is ready to do so.
I remember sitting in this room where there was a TV. It's over to breaking news from the BBC. The Foreign Office is going to make a statement, we've got news. During this time, I'm on the mobile phone to David Miliband on a really bad line. A bit like, yes, no, okay, yes, that's good, that sort of thing. Put the phone down. Then I'm watching the BBC World Service. He walks on.
I'm pleased to confirm that Peter Moore, one of the 5 men taken hostage in Baghdad in May 2007, has been released today.
Incredible, the relief. I got a phone call at home from Pete's step-mum to say, can you come over to our house? We're going to have a phone call with Pete in an hour. And I couldn't believe it. You know, until I'd seen him, spoke to him myself, I was just, it was all sort of suspended. And then to go over to their house and to hear him, to hear his voice on the phone was just the best. Yeah. Yeah, it was, yeah, special.
Every hostage manages their release differently. For some, they just pick up their life as if they hadn't even been away. They go back to work, they sit down and have dinner with their family and walk the dog. Whereas for some, the reintegration back into a normal life is far more challenging. Even something as simple as spending time with their family or being in a busy place, or even certain sounds will bring back horrific memories and trauma for those hostages.
He was changed. I didn't want to talk about it, his experiences particularly. I left it entirely up to Pete to lead any conversation. I didn't ask any questions. If he wanted to talk to me, he knew he could. I didn't. We just tried to get back to normal as he could be after this awful experience. I think it changed my perspective. I think I'm very head in the sand, sort of optimistic, my happy little bubble. And my happy little bubble was definitely popped. Yeah, I think it did change me.
There is still great sadness in our world. There is still great sadness in Iraq. And the 4 candles that burn here remind us of those 4 who were taken hostage alongside Peter, who have not returned alive to this country.
The 4 guards, I don't really know what actually happened to them. From what the militia told me at the time was that 2 of them had tried to escape, and they explained quite in detail how that escape had gone on, and they were caught and shot during that escape process. And I have been asked, do I believe them? And I do genuinely believe that that is probably what happened. The other ones, that's a bit more of a worse situation, I guess. I was told by the Iraqi government and the militia they were being held in a house, and they heard the American military in the street, and they thought the house was being raided, so they executed them. And they got it wrong. Their house was being raided next door, and they apologised for that.
Obviously, at the vigil, we all had wristbands to remember the 5. When Pete was released, it felt quite significant to sort of take the wristband off, because obviously the 5 became 1. And it was quite, I didn't like the poignancy of the, 5. So, but I felt lost without it. So I got Pete's name tattooed on my wrist where the wristband would have been. And it's, so it's an ambigram, so it says Pete's name one way, my husband's name the other way. So that's my tattoo.
I have to take responsibility for my own actions. It was my choice to go. I knew the risks, and I've always said, going to Iraq in those times and being taken hostage is not unusual. Being held for so long and making it out alive is what makes it unusual. Am I the person I am now because it's 2.5 years later, or am I the person I am now because I was held hostage for 2.5 years? And that's really hard to judge. What I realise is this kidnapping of 2.5 years in Iraq will never go away, but that doesn't have to define my life, and it doesn't. I still work in IT, I still do IT work now, that's very separate from the kidnapping.
We see each other once or twice a month. We message, fairly regularly. Yeah, to be back to normal, really.
I was actually surprised how emotional people were about me. I was really surprised at how much people cared. That really did catch me out, because I just thought they saw me as, a buddy, a bit of a mate down the pub sort of thing, and if, he disappears, he disappears, and if he doesn't, he doesn't. So I was quite surprised when I met up with people again, and they were like, we were thinking about you every day, we was following your story, all that sort of thing. Very, very surprising. Surprised how much people cared about it.